So I just wanted to talk about the situation with my mum and how she kind of changed when she got into conspiracy theories and the QAnon movement, etc., and how she sort of went from very liberal to right wing. And I don't think a lot of people understand that these sort of anti-vax things and the conspiracy theories and whatever are very closely affiliated with right-wing views and movements. And I don't think they even realize it when they're swept up. The people that are swept up into it, I don't think they realize. But it was very recently she started tweeting stuff that was very homophobic. And it's so strange to me because my sexuality was never ever an issue for my mum. She used to have like gay best friends growing up in like the 70s and 80s, and it's very out of character for her to suddenly have such opposite views to what she used to believe in. She confronted me when I was back home recently and said how disgusting I was, the stuff that I was putting on Twitter and whatever else. And this is not news to her. This is not news to anyone, you know. And it was just such a strange thing because it was such a odd confrontation to have someone completely flip their opinion on you and on your life and on your identity and who you are and what you do, particularly obviously someone like your mother, to completely change their mind. It was like I didn't even know who that person was anymore.
So this TikToker by the name of Just Sam Morris tells a really heartbreaking story about their own mother being propagandized so much over the span of just a few months, to the point where she completely had her entire worldview turned upside down, to the point where she is literally going after her own child, calling them some sort of monster. And this is really terrifying, but it's something that we really need to understand. You see, the right wing uses incredibly manipulative tactics where they will pretend that they're for one thing, or they'll use benign ideas in order to lure people in to their absurd conspiracy theories. Take, for example, a simple discussion about how rich people have too much influence in politics in the United States today. This is something that I think we all understand to be fundamentally true. Of course, the United States works for big businesses. But you see, right wings will use memes that sound similar to that. They will come very close to saying something along the lines of, oh, it's billionaires and Wall Street investors that are giving money to political campaigns in order to get them to do things that they like. Or things that are very similar to the idea that politicians have money in the stock market and that influences their votes. But it's a little bit off. And you'll notice this. They'll use words like globalists, they'll use words like elites, but they won't really talk about capitalists or capitalism. So what do they mean? Well, you see, right-wingers will use language that is adjacent to criticizing capitalism, but is actually designed to divert people into anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. That's why right-wingers focus mostly on people like George Soros, instead of, people like Jeff Bezos. They focus on George Soros because George Soros is Jewish, and they are trying to create a connection that simply is not there, because once again, they are trying to prop up anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So they tap in to the working class resentment for the fact that politicians are not doing what working class people want, but instead of operating from a position of reality that maybe it's just profits, maybe people in Congress and billionaires just both have a mutual interest in profits, and it's not actually some sort of like conspiracy theory. No. Instead of operating in reality and criticizing capitalism, they turn it into a ridiculous, over-the-top, incredibly anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Because without a critique of capitalism, it's very easy for a lot of people to get swept up into conspiracy theories. And with so much anti-communist and anti-socialist Red Scare propaganda that's out there in the world, a lot of Americans are hesitant to critique capitalism because they feel like they're going to be attacked by all of these vicious weirdos on the internet, or even be alienated from their friends and family for having a discussion about how capitalism is evil. But the reality is, most of these nonsensical conspiracy theories can be easily replaced with a simple understanding that, listen, for the most part, rich people are all invested in the entire stock market. That is to say, if you're the CEO of a giant corporation, you're not going to put your entire retirement account into one company. You're going to invest in every company for the most part. And this is true for basically any investor. They're going to be invested in a ton of different companies, which means that if a policy is going to hurt one company, all of the investors in other companies are also going to rally in support of that company because they're invested in everything. That's the whole point. The whole point of the stock market is to tie the interests of all of these capitalists together. So there's no need for any conspiracy theory. They don't need to talk to each other. All they need to do is operate off of the best financial interests for themselves, and they will all, for the most part, be on the same page. And if we want to go to some old school Marxists and their theories of the state, capitalism is defined by socialists as the dictatorship of capital, which is to say the government itself is structured in such a way that democracy is limited and constrained in what it's able to actually do. And we can see this through things like gerrymandering, the electoral college, and a litany of other controls that are put in place to do like voter suppression and things like that, so that at the end of the day, Congress is going to be representing the interests of the wealthiest people. Once again, doesn't require a conspiracy theory. All it requires is that the structure of the government, by its very nature, privileges the opinions of the already privileged. Then when you factor in lobby and campaign financing, that becomes even more intense. There's no need for any conspiracy in any of this. All it requires is for capitalists to behave in their class interests. But because most people don't get that very basic explanation, they will very often go into these wild conspiracy theories to try and explain why politicians aren't doing the obvious things that they should. Why are businesses doing these terrible things and getting away with it? These things can be very difficult to explain if you don't understand the reality that ultimately, at the end of the day, capitalism is more than just rich people being able to get rich. It is about a system of governance that is there to protect the interests of wealthy people over the interests of working class people. And when we understand that, all of this becomes a lot more clear.
This is Ben Carollo with Rebel Headquarters. You can catch my show Galaxy Brain every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Young Turks Twitch channel, and you can follow me at Benjamin Carollo on Twitter.